Maryland's Democratic governor, Wes Moore, says he is considering redrawing the state's congressional districts in response to partisan redraws in Republican-led states. Texas is set to approve its plan, with other Republican-led states like Florida, Missouri, and Indiana signaling they'll do the same.
I want to make sure that we have fair lines and fair seats, where we don't have situations where politicians are choosing voters, but that voters actually have a chance to choose their elected officials. We need to be able to have fair maps. And we also need to make sure that if the President of the United States is putting his finger on the scale to try to manipulate elections because he knows that his policies cannot win in a ballot box, then it behooves each and every one of us to be able to keep all options on the table to ensure that the voters' voices can actually be heard and we can have maps.
In that one district where they have a Republican representative, that they are actively being represented in Maryland?
I think if you look at maps across the country, less than 10% of congressional seats are actually competitive by nature, less than 10%. And so if you look at the average win margin in our state and so many states, the average win margin is upwards of 20 to 30%. So that means we already have so many gerrymandered areas that we have to be able to add a measure of fairness in the way that it's applied. And so, yes, all options need to be on the table in the state of Maryland.
Now, if Maryland moves forward, it would join California as one of the only Democratic-led states pursuing its own partisan redraw this election cycle. It would also eliminate the only Republican seat in the state, perhaps currently held by Congressman Andy Harris. And joining me now is Congressman Harris, Maryland's lone Republican member of Congress. Thanks so much for joining us for this one, Congressman. You just heard Governor Wes Moore talk about it. He says Maryland may need to redraw maps for, quote, fairness. Do you see this as really about fairness, or do you think you and your only Republican seat are being targeted?
Well, of course it's being targeted. This is a stunning reversal from what the governor talked about in his inaugural address when he talked about toxic partisanship and reaching across the aisle. But look, he's running for president. I get it. But the bottom line is, you know, in Maryland, we've had Republican governors. 2 of the last 4 governors have been Republicans. So, you know, fair would be, well, maybe we should have 4 and 4 in our congressional delegation instead of 7 and 1. The bottom line is the Democrats tried to do this in 2022. They got taken to court. The court ruled it was extreme partisan gerrymandering. It was going to reject the map. That would have made it probably an 8-0 gerrymander. So look, they can try again. I think the courts will reverse them again, and this time maybe the courts will draw even a second Republican district. So I think the Democrats and Governor Moore should be careful what they wish for. And again, this is a stunning reversal from the way the governor has conducted himself before he began running for president.
Maryland has faced gerrymandering accusations in the past. Do you think that the current maps are fair?
The current maps are much fairer than the maps that existed before it. The bottom line is these districts are pretty compact. I think the Western Maryland district should be a Republican district. That was gerrymandered a little bit. And again, so if they leave it to a judge could draw a map that actually elects 2 Republicans instead of 1. So if they want to take their chance, let them take a chance. But I think they could come out on the short end of that stick.
What do you know about plans for new maps and your district specifically?
Again, we've lived through this in 2022. They drew the eastern shore of Maryland across the Bay Bridge into the Washington, D.C. suburbs. Now, if the governor thinks that's a fair way to represent, then I'm just going to disagree with him about what's fair.
Do you believe that your district, as it is currently drawn, reflects the fair interests of the voters that you represent?
Absolutely. There's no question that the eastern part of the state, and I represent the entire eastern part of the state up to the eastern edge of Baltimore County, is a relatively conservative area, and it should be represented by a Republican. I get why the Democrats want to do it. They think 7-1 is not a good enough margin for them. They want 8-0. But again, for a state that has elected a Republican governor 2 of the last 4, the bottom line is that that would not be a fair map. And if what the governor wants is a fair map, it should be 5-3 or 6-2.
All right, let's look at a neighboring state just to your south. Virginia uses a bipartisan commission for redistricting. Should Maryland voters have a stronger voice in the process the way that Virginians now do?
I've called for a bipartisan commission from way back when I was in the state Senate. I've always thought that it should be done with a bipartisan commission. But again, if the governor wants to go a different direction, he's going to have to explain that to the voters of the state, especially the independent voters who really do think that gerrymandering is wrong.
All right, there's a bit of a two-way street here going on, and critics say that gerrymandering by either party erodes voter trust. Is that true?
I agree. I think that they should be done by nonpartisan commissions. But again, that's up to each individual state. That's the way the Constitution is set up. That's what I favor. But again, there are people who disagree.
So then do you have a message, for example, to Republicans in states like Texas and Florida, whose pretty aggressive redistricting efforts have sparked all of these calls by Democrats to make their own changes? Now we're in this tit-for-tat battle.
Yeah, I think that honestly, Mark Elias with the Democrats started it by contesting elections, contesting maps very close to the 2022 election, causing some of those maps to have to be redrawn at mid-cycle. I think mid-cycle redistricting is wrong. I think people should know who their representatives are, and those representatives should represent them for 10 years.
Okay, so what do you think is the right balance between giving states control of their maps and ensuring that fair representation for voters?
I think the map in Maryland right now, again, is pretty fair because it had to survive a court challenge. It's not a perfect map. Again, Western Maryland, I think, got shortchanged. But I think overall it's a pretty fair map. And as you wander from that map toward a more gerrymandered map, I think you reduce the ability of people to feel that they're being adequately represented.
And lastly, I know you talked about the states making some of their own decisions here, but just curious for clarification, would you support federal legislation that would create national redistricting standards, or do you think this should just be a state-by-state issue?
I think it should be a state-by-state issue. And again, a lot of the states that have considered it, like California, New York, and Virginia, have set up nonpartisan commissions. Now, normally, because these commissions and these laws are set up by legislators, they have relief valves that are frequently exercised, as they have been in California and New York, to make a pretty gerrymandered map. But I think citizens left up to their own devices in states would agree that nonpartisan commissions are the way to go.
Congressman Harris, thank you so much for your time on this issue. I'm sure we'll continue to check back in as developments pour in, and they certainly will. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you.
And 7 News will continue to follow redistricting efforts in Maryland on WJLA.com and the free WJLA mobile app.